Good evening and welcome this Tuesday for another exciting show for the law and you. This Tuesday and every Tuesday at 8 p.m. we'll be here in your homes. You can call your friends, you can call your neighbors, you can call your family to come and let's go get this journey together. My name is Kenneth Babu, your host, and tonight I have a guest with me. Karibu sana, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Eliud Ngugi. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and the managing partner at Ngugi Mburu Advocates. We are based in Nairobi.
In Nairobi?
Yes.
Karibu sana. Today we want to speak on something that is dear to Kenyans, mashamba. Others call it Mugunda land. And even from the beginning of the time of the Bible, land has always been emotive. And it's very emotive because any person who gets his first salary, second salary, you think about a car, and if you're from Central, you think about shamba. And then the rest of us catch up with the issue about land. So the question is, we are seeing a lot of companies coming up. We are seeing a lot of people with a desire to get land. But somehow people are crying. They're saying, I lost my land, these are fake, I bought a title, I built my family home, and then I came to realize there's nothing there to be, it was not legit. But before even we go to those details, when you speak about property or land, what does it mean? Basics, let's start from the basics. Tuanze pale, ukiongelea mambo ya mashamba, tunamaanisha nini?
Well, for starters, when we talk about land, there are different types of land. Or rather, we call it regime. Or in Kenya, historically, there was a way we started actually giving out land. At some point, the president will actually declare and give you a letter of allotment and give that land to you. We have now what we call private land, we have public land, and we have community land. And so if we start from there, then we'll be able to actually break it down and get to know what you actually need to find out when it comes to purchasing of land, because you need to know whether you're buying a public piece of land, which basically means that this is land meant to be used by everyone or by the government. And then whether, like for example, there are people who have found themselves buying community land, which is land that has been entrusted to a community and cannot be used unless the community comes and actually agrees to give that land or to sell that land to a person.
So what we are saying is that we have private land, hiyo ni shamba kibinafsi, land which is for the public, that is held in trust by the government, maybe the county government, maybe the national government, or maybe a government agency. Then after that you're saying there's community land.
Yes.
So in these forms of land, which land cannot be sold? Which can be sold to someone?
The one type of land that can be sold is private land.
Private land. You can sell private land.
You can sell private land. But in this private land, again, you need to understand the kind of ownership that is with the person who is selling this land to you.
Before we get to that, the private land. So yes, private land, if it's private, I can buy and I can sell.
Yes.
What about public land? Can you sell to me public land? Mi nimekuja nimeona pale ka stadium kazuri, naona naweza mall kubwa pale, and I have the money. Can you sell it to me?
No, you cannot sell public land because one, it's held in trust by the government for public use.
For public use.
Yes. So this will be, for example, land that you find set aside for roads, or for a stadium, or for dams, or
airports,
or even schools.
Yeah.
Some of the primary schools and secondary schools that we have, that is public land that you can actually not buy.
And what about community land? Can you buy a community land and get a proper title?
You can, yes and no. And yes, if you're able to bring together the community to agree to sell this land to you, which will be a lot of work because the community most of the time is a huge community. And so tracing down the people responsible, having them sit down, there's a whole process around it. And so they have been entrusted with this land community for community use, and therefore unless they come and agree that their use is over and now it's possible for them to now sell a portion of it, it's quite difficult. That's my reason for a no, you cannot buy a community land.
So for me, how will I know? Because from what I'm hearing from you that please, if you are buying, wachana na community land, wachana na public land. How am I able to identify? For example, I'm a visitor today in Kajiado, I'm a visitor today in Kisumu, I'm a visitor today in Mombasa. How will I be able to identify this is private land, this is community land, and this is public land? So that, for example, if I meet a John or James, or these days even Jane and Mary, and they want to sell for me land, I'll be able to tell them, yes, I want to buy this land, but this is community land. I'm not able to buy it from you guys. This is public land.
I think one of the ways to establish ownership of land is to first of all conducting something we call a due diligence, which is basically going and doing the various ways of conducting a due diligence. You can either conduct a search through, if you engage a professional like an advocate, conduct a search. Number two, you can do a historical background check on this piece of property. Kwa ground, uende kwa ground.
Uliza watu hapa.
Yes, who and how and where. And then number three, you are able to even request for documentation, which you are able, if it's public land, of course.
No one wants documentation.
Nobody has.
If it's community land, no one wants documentation.
Yes.
So the first thing when you go buy land, ask for documentation.
Yes.
Then when you get the documentation, we'll be able to get to see if this documentation is proper or not proper. I think maybe that will get later in the show on how to get through this documentation. But mahali tumefika kwa sasa is that please do not buy community land, do not buy public land. When the government want to sell public land, they will advertise, they will call a lot of forums. Usiambiwe tena jua nani minister atatupatia, no. Please, if someone ana documentation, kitu ya kwanza kama upatiana pesa yako, uliza hii shamba unaniuzia, uko na makaratasi zake. Now, if someone ana makaratasi zake, at that point, wachana naye. So yes, now we are happy. We know community land we cannot buy the public land. So now we are on private land. And what are the forms of private land? Because I heard you saying there are different forms of private land. And what are the meaning of these forms of private land?
There are various forms of private land. Out there you hear the professionals referring to a certain type called a freehold.
Freehold, yeah.
And apart from a freehold, you will find there is another type called a leasehold.
Leasehold.
And apart from these two, leasehold and freehold, you will find other people referring to sectional property.
Yeah.
So those are the three types of private land.
Yeah.
And to get into the detail, a freehold, just as the name suggests, it's freehold. The person is holding that piece of land for life.
In yake.
Ni yake with the next generations to come.
Yeah.
They are holding it, it's not held, so it's free to that person to hold it for life. Then a leasehold has a limitation where it's 99 years that this land is going to belong to you for a certain period of time. And so you will find that there are some long-term leases and short-term leases. And in the long-term leases, that's where you find the 99 years, and the short-term, maybe even 20 years or 10 years. And then there's sectional property, which is what you can own as a group of people. And most of the time you'll find most of the apartments or flats where people live in a block, they are able to actually own a share of maybe the common areas like the play center for the children, the staircases, the parking area. And so those are the types of the private land.
So we have freehold, we have sectional properties of both ni magorofa. That means hata kama niko na gorofa sina shamba, I can have a title 5th floor.
Yes.
Okay, so now we have sectional properties, we have leasehold and we have freehold. Na freehold umesema with that title ni yangu milele. So the reason why I want us to go to leases is because kuna kitu umesema about 20 years. Maybe when I was buying these, or maybe when my grandfather alikuwa anapata lease, and maybe for purposes of people who are listening to this, leases are given by government because you hold, it's government land, but the government has leased the land for you for 99 years. There's a time the British were giving 99999.
Yes.
But mostly these days is 99 years. But you realize some of these leases are expiring. So unaweza kutana na mtu lease yake imebaki 500 peke yake, and at that point is when you're buying. And then 5 years later unaambiwa toka kwa hii shamba. So wakili, when someone is buying, especially for these leases, I think it's very careful that they look at the remainder of the term. But the question is, if I buy or if I have a lease, maybe I was given by my parents, na naona iko karibu kuisha, does hiyo shamba imepotea narudi kwa serikali ama what happens?
One, you need to be careful when you're buying property. There's actually a limitation. You cannot buy a leasehold property which has less than 25 years to go. So if imebakisha 25 years for it to now expire, that land should not be sold. But there are people who find themselves being tricked to buying such pieces of land. But what happens at the end of a period of time that this land has been allocated to you by the government, there's something we call reversionary interest. It goes back, reverts back to the government, and if there is no plan, for example, around that area, the government is always willing and ready to extend the period of time back to you, to the person.
And that person will be the first beneficiary. You will be the first, which there's a time that nyima wakili matumianga that yeye atakuwa wa kwanza kupatiwa hiyo lease.
Yes.
For them to renew. So I think it's very important, kama vile wakili amesema, please when you're buying properties under lease, ensure they're not less than 25 years because utakuwa unachezwa. Na maybe sometimes the way you say government inaweza chukua ikataka to renew the lease. Then sectional properties. Sectional properties sana magorofa. Yes, unaniambia pale 6th floor, naishi pale 6th floor, naweza pata kataito kangu pale, si ndio? Ni title ama what happens?
We have a new law, but before this new law came into place sometime last year, or 2020, sorry, what used to be in place was you would actually get a lease, which is basically a document to just show the rules of that gorofa, that apartment, and what is allowed in that apartment, whether you can have a dog, whether you can actually use charcoal, such a document that is standard to every owner of that building. And once you get that document, it will be registered against the mother title, which is the main title that has the building, and there will be a registration by putting the name, your name at the back, and indicating that you have purchased this unit number 6 on Gorofa number Sita. So it will be indicated on that, and then your copy will be stamped. And so now you would use this document maybe to even get a loan and to claim your ownership for this. But now, with the new law, they have now agreed to give title deeds. That if you have purchased a unit in an apartment, once you have made that application and presented your documentation for the purchase, then the government is now giving you a separate title deed
from the mother title.
From the mother title, and allocating it a number that you are able to actually now use it to now get a credit, to get a loan or a mortgage using that title deed.
Wakili, the reason I'm asking about sectional properties are the people who have been having these gorofas. You have a project that is coming up, you buy. And there's something you talked, because remember the Gorofa has been built on land that has one title. And what was happening, sometimes you buy your land, but you don't know the entire land, the title is in the bank. And these people fail to pay, and you come, your house is sold or something like that. So, especially when you are dealing with sectional properties, people need to be very careful. You need to be very careful, because most of the time people go to the development, the company, na mnaambiwa hata tuko na wakili wetu hapa, nani hakuna haja utafute wakili wako. And at that point utauziwa hii apartment, it will be transferred in your name, but what you don't know ni kwamba out of these 20 apartments, they took maybe a loan of 1 billion to build them. So you have paid your 20 million, you have paid your 5 million, you have paid your 3 million, but kwa sababu kuna deni ile title na wakishindwa kulipa, the bank comes and sells the entire thing. And I think it was in the news the other day of people, won't mention names, but near the river, those sides, there are people who had bought land, paid their houses, finished paying, but that guy was receiving money and he was not paying the bank. So the bank comes, wants to sell the entire property, people rush to court, and the court said, you guys bought as third parties. You're not even primary parties. And the primary parties, the two people, they agreed if you do not pay the loan, you will, the houses will be sold. And finally the court said, can the land to be sold? The guys rushed to the bank, and the bank told them, come buy back the properties at the market value, or even pay off the loan. We'll not even charge you the property market value. Your house balance yake ni 10 million, bring 10 million. Na wewe ni mse ulikuwa umeshalipa. So I think it's very important for people to understand, especially when you're dealing with sectional properties, those are leases. It's safe, it's even a title, you can go get a loan against it, but please ensure you have a wakili to go check for you the other things. And the reason I say this, most people feel like wakili amekulipisha pesa mingi, but think it this way. Wakili anakuprotect pesa yako ngapi. Because I wonder, people buy a property worth 10 million, 20 million, but they're not ready to pay 100,000 to protect the 10, 20 million or 200,000, or even if it's a million, to protect it. It's fair. The other question I would like to ask, especially when you're buying land from freehold leases, especially like now the government is on an expansion program, railway lines, airports, gazetted forests. There are a lot of people who bought land na ikabomolewa. Na wakasema tulifanya kila kitu. Mimi nilienda nikalipa na nikafanya search nikakuta ni yake ukweli. What advice would you tell people to check, especially when they are near public or community properties and land?
If you're near, or rather if you are actually intending to buy land, even in general, even those sectional properties, you need to, as you conduct your due diligence, one of the things that we encourage people to do, and as advocates we do, is that there was a report that was actually given called the Ndungu report.
Ndungu report, yeah.
This report actually highlighted some of these issues and actually government interest in land in this country. And so there's that, it has listed down properties which were affected by that report. And so number two, for some of those areas whereby there's probably a government facility that is supposed to be built, etc. There are plans which are actually issued out early in time. Those things are gazetted, which is a government notice. So when we're conducting the due diligence, we actually go to the gazette notice and we read up, and we're able to find out, has this area been gazetted, or is there a plan to put up a superhighway or a bypass on this area, so that people don't sell to you land and they are compensated by the government. The government comes in and pays them and says, now we want to put a bypass here, we're going to pay you 20 million shillings. The person pockets the money and still comes to you and sells you this piece of land, and you end up losing, because you end up buying land and the government comes and acquires the land or demolishes your house. So it's important to actually find out, because these plans are out in the public domain. Number two, they are gazetted in the government printer. The government does notices, and we are able, when you engage a professional, the professional is able to counter check and find out whether you're doing the right investment.
And talking about that, maybe something else you need to be very careful. If someone is buying land near airports, railway line, because there are demarcations, the government always says so and so meters from the railway line, and someone said even there are people who have bought land on top of the oil pipeline. Because the pipeline, the way it passes, you need to check, does the pipeline, the way you are saying, enda kwa ground. Ukisikia pale pipeline inapita hapo, know that some meters on the right and on the left, it's government land. So guys need to be very, very careful. There's something you have said about government, because I think in the next show we'll be able to go on now, what are the steps on buying land. But today, there's something that you have said about government taking land, compulsory acquisition of land. Are you saying that my land can be taken by the government?
Yes.
And I can do nothing about it?
The government has a long hand.
Yeah.
You can take your land. And so you should be able to, you need to understand the government, if it intends to, the public interest is bigger than a personal interest.
Yeah.
And so if the public interest is to have a stadia in your area, or to have a hospital, a public hospital, or to have a facility to be used by the public, the government will come and acquire that land, take that land, and all you have to do is either accept, and at least they don't leave you empty-handed. They will come and take that land, but also they are going to make sure that they actually compensate you by giving you the market value of that land. So they will pay you some money before they take up that land. But there's something else you've mentioned about also going to the ground. I understand, as an environmentalist, I understand that there are certain areas that you cannot build or you cannot own. And these qualify: rivers, wetlands, riparian, small lakes. Those areas are actually public property. And so if you are being sold land next to a river or next to a marshy place, you need to be quite careful, because that land cannot be sold.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially on the rivers, where there's something we told about gazettement, and I remember not all rivers are gazetted, but what is gazetted is, I think, 6 meters from the river automatically. Even if it falls on your shamba, just know you cannot even build something permanent on it. And also we have the ones you call about NEMA reports. What is the report saying about that? Because you can buy land here, but NEMA will not allow you to build. Maybe ukienda pale ukichimba ile mchanga itakubaliwa. So for example, if you are buying land for a supermarket, for a mall, or for a church, or for something big, or maybe even to build a gorofa there, you need also to be careful to check, will NEMA allow me to build? Are there other laws? Are there other bylaws? Maybe the Kanjo has decided this place will be a single dwelling house. Na umenunua pale unataka kujenga gorofa. And those are some of the things that, and especially for the leases, when you check the big title, najua watu angaliangi, watu wanaendanga kwa ile the long title wanaangalianga tu, oh hii shamba ni yako, eka ngapi? Nini? You don't take on the conditions. Under the conditions, they say single dwelling can only be used for a particular, for the school, for the church, for a hospital. So even if you're buying it as a private individual, it has to be one of those things you're doing. And yes, people have been doing. But one day, as Pharaoh does not know, Moses will come. And surely, your house will be brought down. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a wonderful, wonderful time with you guys. we have just scratched the surface when it comes to land. Tumeguzia tu pale juu, kwa sasa hatuja kuja kusema unastahili kununua shamba aje, unastahili kuuza shamba aje, unastahili kama ujenge, what are the approvals do you get, who do you go to see, who can witness for who do you need to see it and approve for you. Hivyo vitu zote, we'll be talking about these things in our next show. For today we are just introducing on the issue of land, and if you have any questions, there is a number down on your screen. You can inbox us on our social media accounts, you can inbox us on our Gmail, you can see the number even in our social media handles, that's YouTube and Facebook on One Accord, and even on TV One Accord. We are looking forward to answer your questions, your inquiries, and anything that you're asking about land. We'll be able to tackle it in the next show. Eliud, thank you very much for being with us. I don't know if you have something that you want to you have remembered before about the land before to ongele.
It's basically what physical planning. There are departments in the county governments that actually demand and state and say what kind of houses or kind of developments can be done in certain areas. So you find them allocating industrial areas. There are areas which are supposed to be residential, there are others which are supposed to be commercial. So when you're considering buying land, you need to find out.
There are a lot of things you need to consider.
Yeah. Yes.
Even the Kenya Power lines.
Yes.
You may buy land whereby the Kenya Power line is passing, and you cannot build. You have to go some meters, because especially if you go where there are heavy currencies.
There's even aviation whereby you cannot. There are areas whereby the planes are supposed to pass, so you cannot actually.
You cannot go high.
Yeah, certain heights. Yes.
Na ulinunua shamba huko Ngong Bali, so kwa zile airport JKIA iko 50 kilometers away.
Yes.
But these are some of the things. That's the reason we say when you're dealing like this, go get a professional to walk you through, so that you do not do investments, long-term investments, and then they come to bite you later on. Are you a church that you are doing, maybe you are starting your church in a rented space, hall, land? In the next show, we'll tell you what the steps that you need to do so that tomorrow you and your congregation, you're not told to leave. Join us every Tuesday at 8 p.m. I'm being your host, Kenneth Babu. God bless you and good night.